Thank you everyone for coming out. Our first event of 2026 that focuses on a part of Tudor's history that recurs today in so many modern Tudor watches. What made this such a popular military issue watch?
It is the most unusual watch that I think that Tudor have ever produced.
This looks like it is literally just traveled through time from 1976. I mean, God, this has got some stories to it.
This is a Rolex 5513 with a personality problem.
But first, to my left, Mr. Rolex. Can we get a round of applause for the world's leading authority on Rolex? James, you look absolutely delighted to be here. Can I say so?
Good evening and welcome to the McCutcheon Dowling presentation of our new Algarve timeshare project. We'll be showing development models and floor plans throughout the evening.
We tricked you, haha. No, we are not here to sell you anything. We're just here to tell great stories. And the reason James has to be here as we talk about the history of Tudor military watches is that it is just so linked to Rolex. And you will find through this discussion, where I'm going to be learning as much as you are, that certainly in the beginning, the story of Tudor military watches is very much overlapping with an area that James knows just a little bit about.
But first, we're going to go right back to the beginning. Hans Wilsdorf, the guy who founded Rolex and Tudor, was German, but he became British. Wilsdorf wanted to position Rolex as a premium brand, a high-end brand. And he came up with the interesting idea of doing it by inserting another brand below Rolex. So the first Tudors are all Rolex watches. They have Rolex cases. The dials are made by the same companies, the hands are made by the same companies, but they have less expensive movements. The Tudor was positioned as, in the adverts, the working man's Rolex. It was positioned under Rolex in order to push Rolex up. But because it used exactly the same cases and the same dials and everything, it was instantly recognizable as a Rolex.
So bring the military into the story here, because this is where things take an interesting turn. If Rolex is the pinnacle of wristwatch accuracy and wristwatch robustness, why weren't Rolex watches used in the military, and why does Tudor enter the stage dramatically in the mid-century?
What happened was a number of things occurred at the same time. Rolex launched over the period from the end of the Second World War up until the mid-60s. That was their most productive period. They launched the Datejust, they launched the Explorer, they launched the Submariner, they launched the Day-Date. If we take the Submariner out of that, all of the Tudor versions of those watches were launched a decade after the Rolex one. Interestingly, the first Tudor subs were launched in '54, exactly the same time as Rolex. This is because the other models, like the Datejust and the Day-Date, Rolex knew they were big sellers. So they didn't want to dilute their sales. But the Submariner was a brand new idea, and they weren't sure whether it would sell. So the idea was, let's get as many of them out there as possible. So they got the Tudor subs, the very first ones, out literally months after the Rolex ones.
We have one here, thanks to Matt, one of our fantastic Time+Tide supporters, followers, customers. Matt has given us a spread of watches here, and I know this is torturous. For the watch lovers in the room, this is really unkind of us. We have them all facing us in front of us. And this is, for the people watching on YouTube, you're getting B-roll right now. These guys are not. I'm so sorry. But we do have a Submariner 7928, reference 7928 from 1966. So James, and actually one of the things that we're doing today is we're looking at the ways that these vintage Tudor models are referenced in the modern collection. So I have a Black Bay 58 right next to it. And I want you to talk me through, James, what is it? What are the characteristics of this that differentiated it from a Rolex? And what made this such a popular military issue watch?
Well, this first 7928 is really interesting because this is a Rolex 5513, except for the movement. The hands.
What's the same?
The movement. The case is the same. The bracelet is the same. The dial is the same. The hands are the same. The bezel is the same, and the insert is the same. The only thing that's different is the printing on the dial and the movement inside. Yes, one other difference. So the case back is different because the case back, the movement that was used in these, the ETA, was considerably flatter than the 1530 that was used in the Rolex 5513, which uses exactly the same case. So they were able, what's interesting is that the Tudor watch is about 1.5 millimeters thinner than the Rolex equivalent. But essentially, this is a Rolex 5513 with a personality problem.
And a strong engine. Now, this one was not owned by anyone from the military. This was owned by a Kenyan tobacco farmer. And this does have a lovely tobacco-y patina on the dial. But this watch is not from the forces. But James, tell me, what forces did use these 60s subs?
The first people to use them were the French Navy. They started using them almost immediately after the watch was launched. And the French became the first people to have modern divers, principally because the French had invented the aqualung. It was a Cousteau and Rybakov invention. So the French had many divers, and they had many different diving watches over the years, but they really emphasized on the Tudor. And over the years, over the next few years, both the South African and the Israeli navies trained with the French, and therefore they used exactly the same kit as the French, and they began to use the same watches. Not long after that, at the start of the Vietnam War, the Americans, the US Navy and the US Marines began to use the watch in very large quantities. My understanding is they were actually the largest users. The big problem with the Americans was that they didn't engrave all the cases, so it's difficult to know what's a military Tudor sub and which isn't.
And that partly explains why the next two watches that we'll get to, which see us usher into the Snowflake sub era, this becomes the differentiator. It becomes the most noticeable point of difference for Tudor dive watches versus Rolex. Before we get to that, I'd love your trained eye, James, to run over this reference 7928 from 1966 and a Black Bay 58 from right now, which is in store and available. Let's look at some of the design attributes, because there's a radical shift as we move into the next watch.
The similarities are quite glaring. You've got the matte dial. One of the differences is gilt print against white print, but again, a milled edge to the bezel, an aluminium insert with the minute printed up to 15, and then 10-minute intervals, large screw-down crown, flat sides to the case. They even go so far on the modern Black Bay as to put imitation rivets on the bracelet, so it looks like an old bracelet. You look at the old bracelet here, you can see how it's held together by rivets. The modern bracelet is much stronger, much more robust, but to give it the same look, they have these pressed pieces on the end which look like rivets.
And while we're on that topic, let's go to the comments section. That's going to inflame things immediately. There are people that love rivets. Can we have a quick vote in the room? Who's pro rivets on the modern 58? Is there anyone? Yes. Okay, there's 2.5 people out of a full room. But look, seeing them side by side, you can really understand the designer thinking, let's draw this link and let's really make this.
Let's make the links. Let's get a link for the links.
Yes, yeah. Nice, James, nice. So that ends in this very short presentation to you. our sort of first era of the Tudor sub, there is a shift to the 7016, which we have here again from our friend Matt, which is my birth year, 1976. And this is a South African Navy issue. Now, this watch came on a riveted bracelet, but Matt changed it out to a NATO that was from the same era and also used in the armed forces, but not for this watch. So it looks like it is literally just traveled through time to us from 1976, as battered as I look, as battle worn and scarred and oily. And I mean, God, I think, yeah, you can see this has got some stories to it. But it actually, that bracelet, that strap doesn't live with this watch. But James, let's talk about this big shift to Snowflake, the Snowflake hand, and then an entire design shift away from that first sub.
Again, it's almost identical. The case is almost identical to the 5513. The bezel is identical, as is the bezel insert. But what's changed now is the visible part of the watch, which is the dial and the hands. And my understanding was that this was a Marine Nationale requirement to have a much more visible hour hand. The problem with the Mercedes hand, the way you make the Mercedes hand, with the 3 segments, the hand is dipped into the luminous and surface tension holds the luminous in place. That means that the luminous can only be of a certain thickness. And it is held solely by surface tension, which then, as the material dries, it locks itself onto the frame of the hand. The problem is that military watches tend to get banged around a lot more than civilian watches for 2 reasons. One is that the guys who wear them obviously live a much tougher life than you or I live. But that's not the main reason they get banged around a lot. They get banged around a lot because the guys who wear them don't have to pay for them. It's just another piece of kit. You break it, you go to the quartermaster, he gives you another one. So what happened with the Marine Nationale early watches was that loom kept falling out of the triangle hands. And so they came to Tudor and asked them for a way to solve this problem. And what they did was that they designed the hand now with a large block in the middle. But what they did was they put a small piece of paper behind. That way it allowed them to paint the luminous on top of it in a very large block. And very unusually for a military watch, they decided to carry this design's theme through. So instead of having triangles and circles and bars on the dial, you have squares and rectangles. Instead of having a round dot on the second hand, you have another square. So it is the first military watch that somebody has actually put some sort of design into. And it instantly differentiated the Tudors from the Rolex. And particularly on a watch like this, which really has some age and patina to it, where the loom has darkened to a sort of cafe au lait color, where the bezel insert has gone from shiny black to matte gray. This is the world's most butch watch. I mean, it just, I couldn't wear it. No.
With that, well, James, you're fired. Thank you. That was good. No, things were going so well. But I think I also, because this design code is something that does anyone remember I had a podcast called About Effing Time? Vaguely.
Oh, that was you.
It was me. Yeah, I apologise. But I did talk about this very blocky nature to this hand. And it was something that at the time I found a little too crude, but I have 100% overcome this because as I've gotten to know the brand more and realised that your affections centre around the biggest point of difference for a brand. And I think wearing as I am now the FXD GMT with the exact hand that I was criticising on the podcast, I've obviously made peace. And this really is the central, the most powerful sort of Tudor brand mark in my view. And as James said, the Marine Nationale not only wanted something there where the luminous would stay inside the hand, they wanted something that was, it ended up being 27% more visible underwater. How do you feel about this MN FXD? Because we're drawing a link here to a current Tudor piece which has these design codes. Talk us through it.
What I love about the new FXD, apart from the being titanium, which is beautifully light, is that it's brought back something that I've missed so much on modern Rolex. It has the beveled edge to the lugs, so you get a matte finish, but there's slight polish on the edges, which I just think relieves the monochrome look. I love the touch of red on the dial. It's a watch I'm happy to wear. I mean, I own a Pelagos anyway, so it's a bit pointless really talking about it.
It can't be that butch then if you bought one.
Well,
I mean, you've got a butch side. I've seen your butch side.
yeah.
Are we? We're not. There's no people here, is there? So the FXD, again, carries all these marks. But what's another really distinguishing feature of the modern FXD that we need to talk about?
We're assuming that it means fixed barred, because otherwise I can't work out how else FXD comes into it. Fixed bars are something we see all the time now on modern military watches. But interestingly, as far as we can tell, the fixed bars were never on Tudor mill subs, because the fixed bars are a British military requirement. As far as I know, the French Navy does not have a requirement for fixed bars.
So yes, the Marine Nationale pieces, there is some literature around that suggests that there were soldered bars on some of the Marine Nationale pieces in the 70s. You were mentioning that some have had the spring bar fixed with resin.
That's right. Yeah.
So there's literature around to support the idea that the Marine Nationale required there to be a fabric strap and firmer attached bars. However, Matt does make a good point that in his understanding, the bars were firm enough. They were absolutely fixed enough to not require any extra engineering. And I think we can certainly understand the design decision to have fixed bars on the FXD, because it really, I mean, for one thing, changing in NATO is such a snap when you have fixed bars like this. And it makes owning a watch like this super fun in the way that you can change the strap out in an absolute second. So from a modern use point of view, that's much more a factor than the military requirements. But James, there are watches, as you said, there are some famous mil-spec British issue watches that have fixed bars.
Pretty much everything from about 1950 onwards that was issued to the Army, the Royal Air Force, or the Royal Navy all have fixed bars. The earliest watches we know of are from 58, which were the 6538 Submariners that were recased by Rolex. They're from 56, but they were recased by Rolex in 58. And when Rolex recased them, the bars were solid bars that were held in place by resin. They were used until the Omega 300 Seamasters came in the early 70s, and they had soldered bars. And from then on, all the Smiths watches, the IWCs, all the rest of them, all had soldered bars straight from the factory.
Thank you, James. Now, look, the Tudor military story really centres around these two watches that we've explored tonight. There is just one more that we wanted to bring into this evening because it's an oddity, and it's one that just, I think, has a certain charm, which is the P01. This has resurfaced 5 years ago as a very surprising novelty. But James, tell me what you know about this watch, because it references the P01. The P stands for prototype. It was prototype 1. It was originally designed and sort of, it was trialed by the US Navy in 1960, but it did not make it into standard production, and yet it has a little bit of a legend built around it.
In the late 60s, the US Navy put out tenders for a new dive watch, and Bulliver and Blancpain's American distributor, Tourneck Rayville, and Tudor all put in watches for tender. Neither the Tudor nor the Bulliver were chosen, and the Tourneck Rayville got the prize. The two watches which failed were pretty much forgotten for a long time, and then people discovered that the Tourneck Rayville was essentially a very rare version of the 50 Fathoms, and that became like, oh God, that became the Holy Grail. But this thing literally fell into oblivion. Nobody kind of saw anything about it until about 7 years ago, when there was an auction at Antiquorum, and one of these turned up in steel, along with a drawing of the prototype with Tudor information on it. But the problem with the watch was that it just didn't feel right. The movement dated from later than when the watch was supposed to have been made. But crucially, the back of the case was engraved with a strange phrase, US Marine, singular, not plural. So it obviously been put together by somebody for whom English wasn't their first language. There was a lot of talk about it on the internet forums, and everybody laughed at it, but it sold for a considerable amount of money. And everybody just sort of like went, what the hell? But then, literally 18 months later, Tudor brought this watch out at Baselworld, and the whole world just went, I don't believe it. It was real. And I remember the launch, and on the stand was the exact original of the drawing that had been shown when the fake watch was sold, which was the original Tudor prototype drawings. It is the most unusual watch that I think that Tudor have ever produced. It is the absolute Marmite watch. You either love it or hate it. It's the only one that I know of which has the strange combination of having the old style dial with round and bar indicators, but the snowflake hand. It's so weird.
I asked you this off camera, and I want to ask you again in front of an audience, because I did wonder, we did an event together to talk about your fantastic books. James is a prolific author.
Also?
Your words, not mine. You love Tudor as much as you love Rolex. I feel that there's a passion there.
What I love about Tudor is that it's still an undiscovered country. I still turn up stuff that I think, where did that come from? For a long time, I believed that Tudor now is what it was about 40 years ago, which is kind of like the skunk works for Rolex. They make the weird stuff that Rolex don't make. So the first ceramic watch from Rolex was a Tudor. The titanium watch from Rolex was a Tudor. And it's things like that, and I've seen all sorts of stuff in the past that just think, wow, they really did make that. I think the differentiation between older Tudors and modern Tudors, it really dates from the relaunch of the company, when before the old Tudors like this one, like the Snowflake, used actual Rolex cases, used actual Rolex hands. Now they take inspiration from Tudors of old, but they're not carbon copies. They're not replicas. They are, for want of a better word, to use a musical term, they're variations on a theme. And they have established their own identity. And I think that with the way the Swiss franc has gone, with the way that inflation has gone, with the way that all costs have gone, is that in honesty, Tudor now is in the position that Rolex was about 15 years ago in price points. To me, it's no longer the working man's watch. To me, it's the everyman's watch.
If you had one Tudor that you believe exemplifies the brand in 2026, could you choose one? Because you have a couple.
I'd choose the watch that I own, which is a left-handed Pelagos, which is a watch I often wear in summertime because it's nice and light.
LHD lovers in the house? Anyone got one? Roulette date wheel, titanium? No? There's not one person. There must be someone that owns an LHD. Do we have one? I think we do, actually. Maybe there'll be one by the end of the night. Tudor is one of a few brands that has the Daring collection, which, knowing now as we do, when a pink or a blue chronograph come in, a Dune white comes in, a Lagoon blue comes in, those watches are immediately sold by whoever sees them. And the secondary pricing for these watches is higher than the retail price. Tudor are getting smarter and smarter, in my view, at differentiating to a point where the collection has no Rolex equivalent. So I would, honestly, not to be obsequious here, but I would just keep doing what Tudor's doing, because 15 years ago, it was unthinkable that they would be in this position with the Daring collection. And I know if I said to you, hey, guess what, guys? We got 2 pink and 2 blue chronographs here tonight, they wouldn't be here by the end of the night. So it's really crystallized to me that is a great achievement by the brand to have gotten to a point where they have watches that are as desirable as their sibling brand. Yep. Thank you, James. And can we get a round of applause for James? Thank you. Thank you again to my team. We are really in the thick of it, planning for New York. So please, everyone, cross your fingers for us to get to New York. It's proving to be much harder than we expected, which, people are like, how's things going? I'm like, have you ever been punched in the face? Because that's how it's going. It hurts. But we will get there, and I thank you all for supporting us here in the UK tonight. Please stay tuned for more events like this. And James, thank you again. You're absolutely one of my favourite people in London, and it's been great having you here.
As well. Thanks, guys.
The bar is reopened. Get back into it.